I wanted to do Hunger Games because we've got several fantasy, paranormal, urban fantasy writers very actively following this course already, and multiple comments should always be rewarded. But also, Hunger Games was written by longtime TV writer Suzanne Collins, and it's an incredibly rich set of books and films to study to learn some of the most important tricks of film storytelling. So let's go through our list of basic Act 1 questions. Who's the heroine? Katniss Everdeen. And that is just a great character name. What are her special skills? We see those skills up front in a very character-rich first scene as Katniss crosses into forbidden wilderness to hunt food for her family. So right off the bat, she's a rule breaker. We see in action that she's a hunter, a tracker, and a fantastic archer. She's extremely comfortable in the forest, and this is key. Her entire existence is focused on survival and providing. She's determined to feed her family despite the enforced poverty, famine, and social restrictions of the oppressive government of Panem. Now, she doesn't think of herself as a revolutionary. She doesn't really care about anything but feeding herself and her family and possibly her friend Gale, which are very selfish drives. But the seeds are there for her massive and really exhilarating character arc into the leader of the revolution against Panem. And oh, do we need those stories right now. In epic action stories, the main character's weapon can be really important. So what's Katniss's weapon? Her weapon, her signature really, is a bow and arrow. Now that's a great look for the character in terms of costume design, but there's a lot more to it than that. Let's look at the archetype being invoked here. Who's the Greek goddess associated with archery, the hunt, and the forest? That's Artemis to the Greeks, or Diana to the Romans. Artemis was the virgin goddess of the forest and the hunt. She was unparalleled at archery, and she was a fierce defender of women and children. Does that sound anything like Katniss? And do you see how powerful it can be to develop your character around an archetype? As another example, I've brought up The Walking Dead a couple of times in these videos. So let's look at another archer. One of the most fanatically beloved characters of The Walking Dead is Daryl Dixon, whose weapon is a crossbow. What Greek and Roman god is associated with a bow and arrow? Eros, or Cupid, the god of love. And what's that on the back of Daryl's motorcycle vest? Wings. Do you think these things are accidental? Welcome to Hollywood. There's also a lot of Artemis working in Daryl's character. Besides the forest and the hunting skills and the crossbow, he's also a virgin, at least post-apocalypse. And one of his most compelling qualities is that he's a fierce defender of women and children. So if you want to create an unforgettable character, it's really useful to ask yourself, what archetypes are working in this character? So back to Katniss now. What does Katniss want? We already said it. She wants to survive and ensure that her family survives. What is the inciting incident or call to adventure? And how does that focus what Katniss wants? The inciting incident is the reaping scene. It's the climax of sequence 1, 15 minutes into the film, and it's a major set piece scene. There's a big build-up to a very suspenseful scene in an arena with a whole village there. And Katniss's little sister Prim is chosen as the tribute, the sacrifice, from the district. And Katniss, in horror and desperation, steps up and volunteers to go in her place. So the call to adventure is the reaping. And because of that major event, Katniss's desire for just day-to-day survival suddenly changes to a very specific desire to survive the Hunger Games. Because the point of the Hunger Games is that there's only one survivor. It means Katniss has to win the games. And here's a really important screenwriting trick that you can use. Have the heroine state what she wants, or have someone state it for her, or both. In the Hunger Games, we see Prim say it for Katniss. She says, "You have to win." And right after that, we see Gale say basically the same thing. He says, "You can do this," and reiterates the skills that she has. When we know what a character wants, then we start to want it for them. And suddenly the reader or audience is completely engaged in the action. So what does the audience want? We want Katniss to win. And now, instead of going on to the villain, I'm just going to stop right here and say, go watch the first 15 minutes of the Hunger Games. Look at how that 15-minute sequence, sequence 1, builds so suspensefully and heartbreakingly to the set piece climax of the reaping and Katniss's decision. Because just that is a great way to start talking about sequences and climaxes.